Welcome to the Lair, a place where interesting people you may know tell you things you didn't. So grab a chair and your favorite vice and get comfortable. There are no rules in the Lair, but there is Laura Bagcom. You know her from TV, and she is not into media monogamy. Let's find out who else is in the Lair.
Welcome to the Lair, Denise Doyle.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
You have the privilege of being our first female guest. I never even realized that. Gabriella is joining us as always.
Mm-hmm.
Gabriella, I never even realized that.
I was actually really excited that you were here. Laura told me that you were a feminist, I believe you used the word to describe.
Well, Denise and I have had a few chats about issues around women, and I find that her passion, now that I have a daughter, Rob has noted that I'm much more cautious about what I hear her exposed to in terms of messages, and so he thinks it's funny, but I find Denise much more so than me.
It's, we were having this discussion, I'm working on a blog right now about something called the princess culture. So it's about, Disney and this whole idea around little girls being princesses and growing up to be very...
Setting up false expectations.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm doing some research around that, and it's really interesting. And even around the whole, girls wear pink, boys wear blue, this whole phenomenon that started apparently in the 1980s. Just, it's an advertising thing. That's all it was. When babies were born at first, they all wore white. And now little boys wear blue and little girls wear pink. And, if you saw a little baby in a carriage walking down the street and it was in blue, you would assume that it was a boy.
See, I never knew about this princess theory or how insidious it was. It all started with Gabriella mentioning to me, we were talking about the royal wedding and what she was going to wear. We talked about princess gowns. And Gabriella said, Laura, that's part of this princess thing that the wedding industry started, so that girls at very, very young age become, they start to build this princess dream, and it culminates in this $20,000 wedding. And I had no idea it was so insidious. Have you heard about that before? Has anyone ever put it in that kind of deliberate context?
Again, but what it does for mainly women is set up unrealistic expectations. And I think we can take it one step further when we think about, sort of the whole sexualization of women in the media. Mm-hmm. We followed through on a video that was done in Montreal a few years ago, and it was called Sexy Inc. And essentially what it did was, from a young person's perspective, a young woman's perspective, take a look at how women are portrayed in magazines, on television, and you compare that to how a young man is portrayed, and you see a vast difference. Mm-hmm. You see it in the toys that that we buy girls as opposed to boys. One of the toys that is talked about a lot is, I don't know if you've seen them, the Bratz dolls.
The Bratz dolls are horrendous, and the only reason I say this, I was on their website doing research for this article. I have no idea why anyone would give their kid this doll. Absolutely no idea.
And yet, I remember when my partner's daughter and my niece were that age, that's what they wanted.
It's interesting that you talk about those messages, because a particular let's not use the brand name directly, but a particular very famous show about a clubhouse, right? It's a cartoon for little kids. And there are some female characters, famous female characters that we've all come to know and love. And as I'm listening to my kids watching this, I didn't seem to care about my son watching this stuff, but when my daughter's watching, I've said several times, did I just hear that the male figure in the show rescued the woman? Like the female characters in the show are always losing things that they need help finding, are always, baking, showing up with cupcakes to the clubhouse. Like these stereotypes, it's right out of the 1950s, but it has other modern themes in it, but they haven't seemed to have picked up on those. And it's not offensive overtly, but I'm protective in that way. I don't know if I'm becoming, is that what defines a woman as a feminist?
I think it's part of it. I think, what's interesting, the word feminism, depending on where you were brought up in the world, has a different meaning.
Can have negative connotations now.
Even young women today. I'm not a young woman, but there are many young women who come into the YWCA, and they may not call themselves a feminist, but when you think about what their values are, they value the same things as I do in terms of women's empowerment, women looking for real role models in terms of, and ensuring that women have equity and equality. Mm-hmm. So if you believe in all of that, you may not self-label as a feminist, but for me, I would label that a feminist. That's my labeling. So I think it depends on the individual, But if a woman comes to me and tells me she believes in equity and equality for all, then I would say, yeah, you have feminist
See,
values.
That's funny you say that, because I've always believed in equality. I think the genders are different, but I think that they're equal. You know me well enough to know that I don't let anything stop me. I think that women have rights and opportunities. They can make them for themselves, and oftentimes I give credit to the generations before me that helped to lay the groundwork, because it's much easier for me than someone even 20 years ago.
Exactly.
But when I think about feminism, I think of Gloria Steinem, I think of bra burnings, I think of man-hating, and I don't want to be a part of that. Does that drive you nuts when you hear women like me who might espouse feminist ideals and yet we reject the history of feminism?
No, I think everyone has their own personal choice. But again, if we bring it back to what's positive and what needs to happen, the real work on the ground around having, and you both do this, having strong women role models who we can aspire to or we can ask advice, that's so important. And women and men are part of the solution as far as I'm concerned when it comes to feminism. Because if we don't have men who believe in equity and equality, we continue to fight those battles on an ongoing basis. So I truly believe that if we're, and we'll take away the word feminist, because again, equalist, I like that term.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Another note on that is that the other problem we run into with the word feminist is that we in the Western world have our own view of what feminism is. But we're increasingly becoming a global world, right? In a global community. So therefore, there are many women from around the world who don't self-identify as feminists.
And you alluded to that earlier, that it has different connotations around the world. What did you mean specifically?
So again, in certain countries in the world, they wouldn't call themselves feminists, and yet, we saw what happened in Egypt recently, where it was women activists who were out in the street searching for democracy, wanting their rights. They didn't necessarily stand up and say, I'm a feminist, I want my rights. They were looking for equal rights.
So, and I don't know if you can speak to this constituency, but people like Stein and people who laid the groundwork for women like Gabrielle and I, I'm a Gen Xer, she's a Gen Yer, but we have tremendous opportunities that were because of their efforts.
Yep.
Do you think that they are frustrated by the fact that we don't self-identify with what they created, or do you think they're just happy that we're living the feminist ideal?
I think they're probably happy. I think that if you talk to any of them today, just as I would recommend, that I would say, have we reached to a true equality? No, we have not. I mean, the fact remains that women in Canada are still making 70 cents for every dollar a man makes. Women have not achieved a level of equality as, when we think about women in business, yes, we've done well, but, the percentages will tell it, the story's there. We are not in equal numbers in boardrooms. We're not in equal numbers at decision-making tables. We're doing better on the political front, but we're still not there in equal numbers.
Well, let's talk about Hamilton.
Yep.
The lack of leadership of women in this city has always confounded and frustrated me.
Yep.
When I run big events and I try to balance the panel, and I can name 10 off the top of my head in the last 10 years,
Yep.
the struggle to find a woman of prominence and power who is not in political office is very, very difficult. There's like a handful. And so I look at it as they don't have the power. Perhaps you see that differently.
I think they do. I think the power or the opportunities they need are not necessarily coming their way, and I don't believe that every woman should sit back and wait for that opportunity. You need to take it yourself, take that initiative. But I mean, I'll use an example. I mean, it's getting a little bit better, but when we look at our local media, say print media, when they ask someone's opinion in the paper, who generally do they ask? You very seldom see an equal number of women as you do of men being asked their opinion. I think that, and that happens a lot in not just print media.
Sure, most pundits are males. I mean, I get to do punditry, and there's so few women in this country who get to speak about politics or do punditry at that level.
I think one of the reasons that I do the work that I do is the one event that we have locally every year is the Women of Distinction event. And I think we need to start building on some of the recipients and nominees at that event, because there are so many amazing women in this community that are already doing great work, and whose opinion we could, in my opinion, we'd do well by hearing more from.
So let me challenge that notion.
Yep.
Because when you have a Citizen of the Year event, you sort of take that as being the top level event for the city for a citizen, and then we have the Gallery of Distinction. And when you have a specific gender-specific award program, it seems to me to be secondary in terms of stature because it's only for one gender. So isn't giving women their own awards sort of saying you can't compete in the gender-neutral award process, so we're going to give you sort of a sub-award to hope to, I mean, that might sound horrible to say, Denise, I see your face, she's getting pissed.
No.
but you
No,
know what
'cause
I'm saying? Like, you don't have man of distinction, you just have citizen distinction. It goes mostly to men. But is the
We
woman of
don't need
distinction-
man of distinction because they win all the other awards in town.
Right.
So think about it.
So is this
So,
set up as a
I mean-
catch-all for women who don't make?
Well, no, I personally believe we need to see more women winning those other awards in Hamilton.
Yeah.
We seemed, so that's my opinion on that. But I do believe that it's important to celebrate women in this community because, as you said, we don't see them front and center. We see this as an opportunity to start building that profile, make more people aware of the great work that they're doing, and hopefully, by the work that we're doing at the Women of Distinction event, we may see more of these women in the community.
I would never negate the work of the Women of Distinction. They were kind enough to put me up for an award a few years back. No, and I appreciate it. What I'm driving at is that this idea of a hands up, that women need a hands up to get to that level. Some men might look at it, and maybe I might look at it and say, well, just compete in the real race. Just compete for the big award. You know what I mean? Just go after these guys.
And I would say to you that there are some women who can do that and some women who can't. And whether it's, I mean, it comes down to socialization, where what our backgrounds have been, who's influenced us, and in some cases, I mean, that's why the YWCA, the organization I'm with, is in existence. We are in existence to empower women. That's one of the reasons we've been involved in this community for over 120 years. I do believe that women, some women, not all women, I mean, I look at you and I look at your successful business and the staff that you have around you. You're an amazing woman, and I hope that you continue to inspire other women in our community because you already do.
Well, that's great to hear, and you know what? It's. I would never pretend that that was my goal, because how do you have a goal to inspire people? You just kind of do your thing, and if it happens, it happens. I want to throw a couple of scenarios by you, Denise, and get your reaction to them. Okay? There's a couple of things that I've seen lately that have just really pissed me off. One is there was a big
You
surprise.
got pissed off?
Big surprise.
What?
I'm only chill when I'm relaxing and talking. Not the rest of the time, as most people know. As a client said to me the other day, I need to be more aggressive. I need to state my mind. There's an ad that was, a little video that was produced. And it was during the election, and it was an anti-Harper effort. And it was clever because it was, the idea, the way that it was done, it was easy to view. And what it was a bunch of women in Hamilton doing these breakup messages on video to Harper. Like, Harper, I'm breaking up with you because you didn't, I think I hear someone else in the Lair laughing. Who's laughing? As usual in the Lair here, we have a peanut gallery. But it was a bunch of messages like, you never, you spent money without telling me what it was, so I'm breaking up with you, and you didn't give me the love. And I watched it, and it made me sick inside, because the way I took it was, oh, so women can't comment on politics from a factual, rational, compelling point of view. It has to be under the guise of breaking up with this person because he cheated them or spent their money. It just seemed to me to be rife with stereotype, and it offended me. But I don't know if you've seen the video from the description I'm giving you. What's your reaction to that?
See, and I took it a whole different way, and I try to remember my generational difference, and my activism. My political activism is different than a younger person, and I do that in talking with the young women, particularly who come through the Y and Elect More Women. And when that video came out, I actually called a group of young women together at the Y to say, give me your feedback on this. Why did you do this? And for them, they felt empowered. And so I listened and I said, why did you choose that message? And it was sort of, they wanted it to be funny.
And it was.
They wanted it to be funny. They wanted other young people to be interested in it, and they wanted young people to vote.
Well, we're talking about it, so it had to be effective. But I know what you mean, and it's funny. After you mentioned that video to me, just in passing in conversation one day, I started to notice like there are other commercials that are selling household goods like mops and other things like that, and they have this whole dating, breaking up theme.